How you doing? Thanks for downloading the show. You've downloaded a podcast called GardenFork Radio. It's me, Eric, with my friends talking about eclectic DIY. It could be home improvement. It could be computers. It could be how to make pancakes or waffles, because I wanted to make waffles this morning. Today, I also have a YouTube channel, a DIY YouTube channel. But today I have one of my regular co-hosts, Rick, and the GardenFork Scientist. So first, let's welcome in Rick. Hey, sir.
Good morning, Eric. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm excited to have our mystery guest, who we always refer to a lot, but we finally got him on the show.
Yeah, his schedule has settled down in a way that he's more reliably in town and available, and so we're going to take advantage of it.
So welcome, Tony.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate the invitation.
So we kind of let Tony behind the curtain here and all the preparation for the show, and he's been thoroughly amused. So,
or appalled, one or the other.
No, amused is correct. I urge everybody to try to get a guest slot.
Yeah, and if you have something you'd like to talk about, let Eric know or let me know, and we'll see what we can do, as long as it's along the lines of GardenFork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the world of shameless promotion, Tony is actually part of the GardenFork patron campaign. He makes a regular contribution to GardenFork every month. It could be larger, I think, Tony. But nonetheless, he is, No, it's perfect. It's really great. But Tony gets some of the patron-only posts that I make. You can either look at it on the Patreon app or they email them to you. So it's just little slices of life stuff. Do you ever read those, Tony, or you just delete them?
I read them religiously, Eric. I hang on your every word.
There we go. That. Perfect. Good. I'm glad we coached you on that. Yeah. No, but seriously, folks, if you wanna pitch us $2 or $3 a month, you could do more than that. But there's a link in the show notes to go to the Patreon campaign. It's like PBS or NPR. Just helps us pay the bills here. So, on a totally unrelated note, Rick and I have both made comments about chemicals in a derogatory way, and then we have to get these emails from Tony, and I was like, well, we just have to be on the show and talk about chemicals. So I thought I'd call the show Chemicals Are Bad, True or False, and then Tony has the answer for that, don't you?
A resounding false. Next question.
All right, so how's your garden?
It's going to be a little short if that's the only thing we're going to talk about.
Well, I made a comment because I was talking about sugars, because I'm trying to lose some weight, and I said that it's better than, I think I said, the chemical sugar. And what I meant I was talking about eating apples versus something else, and I meant chemical sugar. I meant like high fructose corn syrup. So I should have. What would have been the proper phrasing to use there, Tony?
Better than high fructose corn syrup?
Yeah.
Better than added sugars? It really wasn't your comment. It was our friend Will's comment, who used the term chemical free. And I became one of those people yelling at my iPod because chemicals do not equal bad. And everything is made up of chemicals. Water is a chemical. We're all just bags of chemicals.
Yeah. So we should preface this by, you are an actual scientist. It's not just a running joke of ours.
This is true.
All right.
And you're actually a chemist.
I am a chemist. I'm a biologist, and I actually, after 30 years working in industry focused on environmental health and safety, I now work for the American Chemical Society, although I should state clearly everything I'm saying on this podcast is my own opinion. I'm not speaking for the society in any way.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, we all do that ourselves.
I studied some chemistry in high school, and once we got past the exchange of ions, it just was bigger than my head could take.
I'm willing to bet that that's not true. And if you were to look at it now, you would understand it a whole lot better. I think it's a combination of the way we teach it and kind of the way that it's always been approached. Because it's really, there's nothing magical about it. And I wish that science in general and chemistry in particular were better understood by people. Because then, well, one thing, you wouldn't have people saying chemical free, but...
Right. I think that the environmental movement has done a very good job of making us, when we think of chemicals, we think of pollutants or something. And in reality, I'm alive today because of chemicals, you know?
Exactly.
Well, we all are.
Yep.
I know, but I'm such a basket case. I'm like, so did you, as growing up, did you become like deep into science right away, or was there a magic moment for you to get interested in science?
I was always interested in science, but yeah, there were really two moments in particular. I'm of that age where apparently there was no consumer safety product commission or whatever it is, because I don't know, I was maybe 10 years old when I was given a chemistry set that I distinctly remember included liquid mercury among some other things.
Oh, wow.
That like you shouldn't have outside a lab, much less be giving to a 10-year-old kid who's going to do stuff in the kitchen. Also, I still remember, and this was, I guess it was 5th grade science class. We were talking about flammable versus non-flammable. And with the admonition we were supposed to be doing with this experiment with our parents, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my mother, and we had a candle and a bowl of water and a bunch of stuff. And we were, so you try to set the rock on fire. Well, that's not flammable. You set the paper on fire. Yeah, that burns. Wood, that burns. We were kind of going through this. And we had this ball of cotton batting, like a Johnson & Johnson cotton ball. But it was huge. It was like 4 inches. And if you've never seen one of those alight, it's pretty impressive. And my mother batted it out of my hand, and it went flying through the air just as my father was walking in from work. And my poor father sees this ball of flame come flying and land on the kitchen floor, and he stomps on it, and he just keeps walking. He doesn't say a word. He just keeps walking, and his voice trails back as he gets to the front hall. And I know I can't see him from the kitchen table, but I know what he's doing because I've seen him do it 1,000 times before. He's hanging his coat up in the closet, and his words drift back to us. Should I ask, or should I just pretend I didn't see that?
Wow, you still remember that? Is great.
Oh, that's kind of, no pun intended, burned into my consciousness. I'll never forget that one. That was kind of impressive.
Yeah, I remember the chemistry set. I remember us trying to make things that would explode with the chemistry set.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if it's not going to explode, there's no point in doing it.
But I wonder if that is a trigger for some people's interest in chemistry, is like, wow, we put this powder with this sulfur and saltpeter and we roll it up in something and it'll cause an explosion. I wonder if that kind of sets people off on a science tangent or not.
Oh, I think it clearly does for some people. I think that sometimes it's the color changes. There's actually quite a debate among folks who do various demonstrations in the chemical sciences over the value of what some people call chemical magic shows. Right. Some folks get all bent out of shape saying it's not magic, it's science. And I forget who it was. Was it Carl Sagan? Somebody has the quote, anything that a sufficiently advanced society has will appear as magic to a society that has not reached that level yet. And
yeah,
I
that was Sagan.
Quote, but
yeah, but that was Sagan.
Yes,
I remember that. Yeah. But anyway, and I think people use chemicals rather loosely. Essentially, all of life is nothing but moving ions around. Move them up, move them down. When the ions stop moving, you stop moving. And, chemicals, I think people say chemicals, they mean bad chemicals. But then, an apple is full of chemicals, and it's not added chemicals. It's a chemical process.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think some of the bad stuff comes around like when you read the ingredients on your cereal and those ones at the bottom are polysyllabic, and they could have just said, made that a little easier, but...
Well, hang on a second. Let me read you a couple here, because I'm looking at an ingredient label now, because I thought this might come up.
Uh-oh.
Can I sell you on something that includes hexadecanoic acid and docenoic acid and octadecodianoic acid and omega-3 fatty acid, galactose, maltose, sucrose, fructose. Oh, and the container includes benzene, benzene derivatives, esters, furans, and various sulfur-containing compounds and terpenes.
Yeah.
Interested?
Yeah, not much when you put it that way.
Good. Stop eating eggs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I've got a couple I'll send you by email that are long, but yeah, we have this thing that natural equals good, chemical equals bad. Well, chemical is neutral, and natural, I would argue, is neutral, can be good or bad. You know, it's all natural. You know what else is all natural? Arsenic is all natural. You can get that in nature, no problem.
Yeah. I
don't think anybody's signing up for that.
And there's cyanide in a lot of the seeds, particularly apple seeds.
Absolutely.
I did a video about making applesauce, and I just cut the apples out whole and I throw them in the pot, and then I run them through after it's cooked, I run them through a food mill to remove the seeds. And more than one person left this comment. You can't cook those seeds because they have cyanide and they'll kill you. And I did some research, some science research, and I think you have to eat a bushel full of apple seeds before it will have an effect on you.
Exactly. It's as always, the dose makes the poison. Yep. And you know, folks get all kinds. It's the same thing with food additives. I love the memes that fly around where somebody says that's the same thing that's in fill in the blank. You know, it's used in industry. Well, there's food grade additives and there's industrial additives, and you don't just mix up the two.
There's I'm going to mangle the chemical name, but there was this picture going through Facebook, and it said dihydroxygenate is being added to our food.
Yep.
And that's water.
Yep. Dihydrogen monoxide.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
And monoxide sounds bad because of carbon monoxide, you know, is car exhaust, which can kill you. So it kind of pointed out, I thought of you and I saved it. And of course, then I lost it somewhere. But it just occurred to me like, oh, that's what Tony's talking about. So
yeah,
I think
go ahead. It's kind of like, some of the GMO debates, everybody's saying no GMO, but that's because they don't make the growers list on your non-GMO products all the things they had to spray on your apple to get it to the point where you can, they can grow it and you can eat it, because it has essentially, apples are frozen in time. They're clones, and the bugs and fungus and bacteria keep evolving, and so they had to spray the apples with more and more stuff, or you can have a GMO apple. It's just if they listed everything on one label, most people would go for the GMO apple probably.
Yeah. Tony, do you have some more thoughts? Knowing that you are a scientist, I imagine you had some notes that you made beforehand.
Actually, I did make some, but the biggest thing is just for folks to understand it shouldn't be that scary. I know, yes, some of the names are hard to pronounce, some of the things are hard to read, but it goes beyond science. The memes that make their way around social media just drive me banana sandwich crazy, because it's so easy now to check, kind of the factual basis. And so many people just get horrified and hit share. And there's no critical thought. There's
right.
And it goes back to, like you talked about, the dihydrogen monoxide. And, well, I just did it to you with the egg.
Yes.
I just boom, boom, here are these things. And I remember there was a discussion about fluoridated drinking water about 20 years ago. And I went to the meeting and somebody stood up and said, when I turn on my tap, I don't want any chemicals coming out. And me being me, I said, I thought you wanted water. And, well, I don't want any poison added to the water. Okay. So you don't want us to add chlorine to kill because I would argue there's a long list of positive contributions to human society that have been made by all of the sciences, but particularly chemistry. but I'm not sure that any is more important or more basic than sanitary drinking water, than what began as the chlorination of drinking water. Oh, yeah. And, I find it interesting that folks now get all kinds of excited about trihalomethanes and they might cause cancer at certain levels and blah, blah, blah. You know what? Yeah, my parents' generation and certainly my grandparents' generation weren't worried about having, getting cancer from their drinking water because they were dead before that would ever happen.
Yeah, we've made so many advances that now we can pick on the minutia of, there's a tiny presence of this chemical, of this, compound, and then they get all, and I think maybe car accidents will kill more people than that particular thing, that meme that's running around.
By far.
I see the misinformation a lot of times with these memes about honeybees.
Yep.
And the problem is that new beekeepers pick up on them, and they're like, I'm just going to have organic honeybees, and I'm like,
yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck with that, and I'm like, look, you vaccinate your children. Wouldn't you want to vaccinate your honeybees,
Well, except for the fact that we've got a whole crew of folks who would rather listen to an ex-Playboy bunny when it comes to vaccinations. And Jenny McCarthy and vaccines cause autism, which, the one study that showed that turned out to be a fraud. Not just wrong, a fraud.
Yes.
But still, that canard exists.
Yeah, I see it actually. I was talking to a neighbor about a certain prominent politician who's done a lot of good things in their career, and there is a certain speech they made, and some people who opposed them recut the speech into a little soundbite, and this thing is circulated through the world to the point that my neighbors are like, we hate that person because they said this, and I'm like, well, and I sent the link to the real speech. I'm like, no, they didn't say that. It's shown right here. No, that's fake news. And I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. So that's only going to get worse. Yeah, that's only going to get worse. Have you seen the new? I know we're getting off chemicals here, but the new technology that you get enough video of a person talking, and there are systems now that will allow you to manipulate the video and actually put words in their mouth. And have it look like they're saying it.
Yeah, I just heard a podcast on that within the past month or two, and that's insane.
Yeah. So it's going to be tough. But, it's always amazing. You go back to beekeeping and chemicals. I'm a master gardener here in Virginia. And one of the things that people worry a lot about are chemicals in agriculture, but they don't think about probably the worst user of chemicals in the states are gardeners and people with homes and lawns. People cannot mix chemicals for the life of them, and I have seen even people I thought were pretty knowledgeable put way more chemical on the. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put way more chemicals on their lawn or in their bug spray or something than they needed to. Whereas in agriculture, it's pretty well established, and they know how to mix chemicals. It works better.
It works better, but it's still a problem. Runoff is a huge problem. Non-point source pollution, particularly here in Virginia, but kind of throughout all of our watersheds. That's a big issue. But the other thing, and I think we're going to touch on this later, Rick, in a separate discussion. I'm all for gardening, and folks want it, but we need to feed 7 billion plus people on this planet.
Right.
And we're not doing it without the Haber process. We're not doing it without commercial fertilizers. Not everybody's going to be self-sufficient. That's not the direction the world took. And unless we want to kill off a lot of people, we're not going to get back to those days.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Although to be such a downer.
Yeah. Thanks, Debbie Downer.
Well, I was actually just going to ask a try for a more positive tangent here. And Tony, in your work, do you see any neat, cool stuff coming along?
Absolutely. That's one of the best parts of my job. So we do, We host 2 national meetings a year, the American Chemical Society, and a lot of cutting-edge research is presented there. And actually, a couple of folks on my team are in charge of putting together our webinar series. So I get to see a lot of that firsthand. And, we just did something that we call Program in a Box, and it was all about the science behind getting people to Mars.
Oh, wow.
And what we need to do. And that is just endlessly fascinating to me as you look at these thorny problems and how we go about solving them.
I actually am big into space rocket, the world of space. Actually, another podcaster who does the Space Rocket History podcast is going to be on this show soon, and we're going to talk about that. But I think the space program is a big user of chemicals, I would say.
Absolutely.
I'm really intrigued by the different propulsion methods they use for rockets. And the Saturn V, I think it was kerosene and liquid oxygen, if I'm not wrong.
I'm not sure about that, but I have seen in my previous job, I did a lot of work with Aerojet Corporation, now Aerojet Rocketdyne, and I actually got to see them pour the solid booster for an Atlas V.
Wow.
And that was cool. That was very interesting to see how that's done, and the difference between the liquid fuel engines versus the solid fuel motors. I think I have that right. Listen to our buddy Neil deGrasse Tyson. He can give you off the top of his head just how much per pound thrust you need to escape the gravity well of the Earth. And there's an awful lot of chemical propellant you got to put in there to do that before we can get out there and talk about ion drives or other various types of drives, solar sails, things like that.
Are there still some basement chemists coming up with interesting things as well?
But yes, obviously it's harder to do for a variety of reasons, yeah. Although, and this is kind of a double-edged sword, if you look at particularly on the gene editing CRISPR, which I could really get into detail on. I don't think we want to here. In fact, I know we don't. But that's the gene editing, and you probably saw in the news this week that the scientist in China is claiming to have used it on humans. One of the real concerns about that is you literally can get all that you need to do that for a few $100 off of the internet and have it delivered to your home.
Oh, wow.
And that's, but there's also on the plus side, particularly in the field of green or sustainable chemistry, where the idea is a lot of chemistry is done with various catalysts and or at pressure and temperature. And one of the things that green and sustainable chemistry is looking at doing, if we can do things at room temperature, at standard pressure, and without these exotic catalysts, often by using some sort of biomechanism in the process, that is going to be, it's inherently safer. We're using less hazardous chemicals. We're lowering the risk. We're lowering the footprint. It's just a better way to do it, particularly if you can get the cost piece. The one thing that I always talk about when I talk about green chemistry, it has to be able to compete on cost. It's wonderful to say that people will pay more for that product, but the fact of the matter is we know that most folks won't. And certainly to get the switch made at an industrial level, at a scale-up level, it's got to be at least cost competitive and preferably win on cost.
Yeah, people, they want to save the earth, but they want the Walmart price.
Right.
Well, on the other hand, you can't start a new process and build it up unless it's somewhat subsidized somewhere along the way until you can get it to scale.
Correct.
So, it's kind of a two-edged sword that way, too.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and I don't know if we'll pivot or not because we've gone a little while already. But, I know we wanted to touch on electric cars. And one of the things there, we have subsidized oil and gas for so long, and we can talk about that from a lot of different directions. But as a chemist, one thing that I don't think people understand, we don't talk enough about, we're burning our chemical feedstocks. Oil and gas is used to make the vast majority of chemicals, of pharmaceuticals. Those are our chemical feedstocks. And instead of using them for that higher purpose, we're burning them at an artificially low price through a very inefficient process. So we get about 23% of the value out of them to power our various modes of transportation. That doesn't seem to be a smart use of what, quite frankly, is a finite resource. We keep thinking of it as infinite, but it's not infinite. And someday, if we don't turn away from this, set aside global warming, set aside just from we make chemical products out of this. If we're burning it and all of a sudden we can't make plastics anymore, we can't make pharmaceuticals anymore, our future generations are not going to look back kindly on the decisions we made.
Wow.
Whenever people talk about that, you'll mention, well, eventually we're going to run out of these things, oil and gas, and they'll say, oh yeah, but in the future we're going to have solar and we're going to have that. Well, this is the future. Those things are possible now, and we need to be thinking a lot harder about how to do them, and also how to make our homes just more efficient. I've worked really hard just making this house as efficient as I can to support us in our old age, but also just it's the right thing to do. And it's great living in a really tight envelope like this.
That's to keep you inside, Rick.
I think it's to keep those escape dogs of his inside.
Yeah.
So, Tony, do you drive an electric car?
I don't anymore. I leased a Nissan Leaf for 3 years, and I loved it. And it saved me money to the tune of somewhere around $2,800 to $3,000 a year. But at the end of the day, the range issue when I lived in upstate New York was a problem.
Yep.
Now, Rick alluded to it earlier. I now live down in the Washington, D.C. area. At the moment, I just moved recently. At the moment, I own 3 cars. I am very much looking forward to getting down to 1. I take public transportation in every day, and I need to go back and look and see, can I, in fact, switch to an electric or a plug-in hybrid? And I don't know the answer yet, but ideally I would love to do that.
I'm very intrigued by the Tesla 3, the inexpensive Tesla.
Inexpensive in quotes, though, right? I mean, it's still. But yes, but the big thing is that's exactly the kind of thing that Rick was alluding to. We need to do that sort of research. The future's now. We need to make this work. Or figure, like for a while, everybody thought hydrogen was going, but you needed to rebuild all of the infrastructure around hydrogen that we have around gasoline. And that's just not going to happen. But with electricity, we already have that infrastructure. It changes the model, but we've got most of the infrastructure in place.
Right. You've already got 220, either single phase or 3-phase running to the gas station,
Yep.
It's actually probably a little higher voltage, but on the pole it's a higher voltage, but cutting off the pole it's probably 220. So you could configure, like on the Merritt Parkway, which starts in Connecticut and goes into New York City, there are 2 rest stops, and there are regular pump gas station there, but also there are 4 electric car charging stations, and it did not take a lot of work to hook those up. It's just, I'm pretty sure looking at it, it just looks like they ran 220 from the pole and set up these charging stations there. So it's not like this Herculean thing. It's like already there,
Exactly. And they've figured out a way to charge for it. And now if we can just get the battery technology, when I owned the Leaf, to get a decent charge was going to, even on the high speed, I think it was a 480 volt, was 20 minutes. And, I could plug into my 220 at home or at the grocery store. But at home, it would, I could get a full charge in like 7 hours. Mm-hmm. You plugged into 120, it was like 22 hours. It was brutal.
Right. So Do you see yourself going back to an electric car in the future? Or?
Like I said, if I could, I want to figure it out. I certainly, Rick has talked about it on the podcast before. For a lot of the driving that I do now, it's to the grocery store. It's, my car sits in the parking lot 5 out of 7 days, and sometimes 6 out of 7.
Do you see some? Are there actually? Does the battery technology keep on advancing, much like the computer chip speed? Are we going to hit a wall with that, you think, or?
Well, we haven't had the big breakthrough yet on the battery technology. And one thing, and this goes back to your comment earlier about, kind of cutting edge stuff. I'm interested in the alternative technology because lithium ion, nickel cadmium, again, we're dealing with things where there's a limited amount of those metals at our disposal. We need to figure out a different technology, a new technology, and there are folks working with that, but it's not there yet. In the meantime, we need to keep improving what we have, absolutely, but there needs to be a breakthrough.
All right, so that's what Rick and I are going to work on in the basement then.
There you go.
I was thinking that most of the basement chemists are actually probably doing something recreational.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've just about hit we like to keep these about 30 minutes or so, we figure, is most people's commute to work.
But do you want to give the listeners a preview of what you guys are going to talk about?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what Tony wants to talk about. Something about Jefferson and Hamilton. And I forget, this started on Facebook, didn't it?
Yeah, so if you follow Rick at all, he's a big Jefferson supporter, and I'm all for the higher ideals of Jefferson. I have a real struggle with the fact that he didn't exactly do a great job of living out those ideals, but we can talk about the time he lived in being different. But at the end of the day, the guy who had it right as far as where this country was going and where the world as a whole was going was Hamilton. And your buddy and mine, Clay Jenkinson, to me, does himself no favors with the whole Hamilton is my deadly enemy shtick.
Well, that's been going on since his Reno years.
Oh, I understand that, yeah. But
okay, so save those thoughts because my eyes are glazing over.
Oh, me go.
No, but seriously, Tony and Rick are going to do a podcast for GardenFork Radio talking about these two things, and I know nothing about it, so I want to listen to it as a guest in my car. So Rick is going to record it, and then we'll post it after we do this one on the chemicals. And I have to admit, I've been really, as we all know, my attention span is like a squirrel. So Tony and Rick were just like, we have to do this show, and they got it all. They put it all together, and I just sat down here on a Sunday morning and hit the go button. And I barely got on the show because I forgot my Skype password.
Now we found all that discussion at the beginning, and now we find out the real reason. Gotcha.
So Tony is an occasional Facebook group person. You can always talk to him there. Or if you have questions for any of us, it's radio@gardenfork.tv. That's radio@gardenfork.tv. And you can become a patron like Tony. There's a link in the episode notes here as well. So anything else, Tony?
Nope. Thanks for the opportunity. Go make your waffles. You hopefully have buttermilk. You can make those good self-rising buttermilk ones you made on your video about 1.5 years ago.
Bonus points. Oh, but with chemicals, I could make my own buttermilk.
Buttermilk is a chemical, but in any event, we're not going there.
All right, so everyone, make it a great day, and please tell your friends about the show, and stay tuned for the next one, the Hamiltonian Jeffersonian debate.
And good to hear your voice, Tony.
Thanks a lot, Rick. I appreciate it.
Okay.
GardenFork Radio's executive producer is Jimmy Goots of hollowbooks.com, and our music is licensed from uniquetracks.com.